Chief Ryan Duffy, Newport Police Department, joins us this week here on the Newport This Week video podcast as we look back on last week, a lockdown at Rogers High School. I mean, this can mean a lot of things. The specificity here, evidently a student had a BB gun outside and fired it. I mean, that is clearly going to trigger, no pun intended, a significant response. Chief, thanks so much for your time. The executive summary on what took place last week.
Certainly. So we got a report from somebody who claimed to be an eyewitness that a person stepped out of a vehicle and was shooting a gun in the area in the parking lot at Rogers in the area of the tennis courts. That person was driving out of the area, but said that they witnessed it and they heard it, and so that started essentially a significant response from the police department. It's one of those calls that when you hear the details of it, really is impactful to the first responders, the men and women that are responding to this. When while we were en route to this, we made contact with the school administration. We let them know basically what we knew about the report. And as we have trained and as we've had such a good working relationship with the schools and the school department, we made recommendations about the posture. The school made a decision to do a shelter in place. Shortly thereafter, we arrived on scene and began to investigate. We made an identification of a juvenile. We were able to locate that juvenile, and we subsequently placed that juvenile into custody. Shortly thereafter, we were able to change, or the school administration was able to change the posture of the school from a shelter in place, and that was pretty much the 30,000 foot view of it. Of course, within that, there are a lot of things that happen and take place, and a lot of it has to do with the training that we have done with our staff, with the training we have done with the school department, and all that training is meant to have the best outcome in a situation that can be terrifying.
Right. Certainly proved out to be true here in this situation where the response and then ultimately the person placed into custody, it occurred without any, I don't know how to phrase this without getting into kind of dark territory here, but it did not turn into an active shooter situation. We'll put it that way. That's a credit to everyone involved for sure, regardless of whether it was a BB gun or anything like that. In general, is there please.
I was going to say, in this circumstance, I don't think there was an intent to do any terror on the campus. I think it was poor decision making with an item that was extremely realistic looking. It wasn't, we're not talking about your Red Ryder, air pump BB gun. We're talking about a weapon that looks identical to and sounds like a especially to those who are not particularly familiar with weapons, sounds like a weapon being fired.
Significant component right there, no doubt about it. In general, is there a Newport police officer assigned to be on site at Rogers?
We don't have SROs, school resource officers. Here in Newport, we have school liaison officers, which are our community police officers. We have 5 community police officers, and they are assigned to different areas of the city. And as part of those assignments, they have a liaison assignment with each of the schools, which means that they are in and out of the schools during the day. They do school security checks on a frequent basis, but they're not assigned in the building for the totality of the day. It's a balance that we have found works pretty well in Newport. We also enjoy the luxury of having a tight, smaller city, so our response times are pretty small. So even if there's not somebody that's in the building, we are seconds away from the officers that's assigned to that beat and seconds away from the officers that are assigned to the adjacent beat.
There's more than a dozen doors, I believe, at Rogers. Is that a positive or negative piece when it comes to securing the school, and also in terms of response from a law enforcement perspective? You've got a lot of egresses and entrances that can become volatile or viable in a response. What's your take on the doors?
Sure. Design a building, is the designs are made for the ease of use for people to be able to not only enter easily but also exit easily, and for reasons of like fire code, making sure that the people can get out when they need to. That being said, from a perspective of vulnerability, the more open doors there are to a structure, the more vulnerable the structure is. Now, the school department does a great job of limiting that vulnerability as much as possible. But the basic answer is that the more open doors there are to a structure, the less secure it is. And that's something that that our department and the school department work on all the time to ensure that there's that right balance of security for the staff and the students, and also having accessibility, and also for the event of emergency being able to get out. So that's it's a balance. Rogers was built a long time ago where have active shooters were not a thing. It was more for the more exits you have, the more doors you have, you're better for fire code, better for safety, and as far as that's concerned. So the times have changed a little bit, and we look at things a little bit differently. Certainly, these things have gone into the planning for the new building, so as I said, to kind of wrap it up, as it's a balance, and it can be challenging when there's a lot of doors.
You recently had active shooter training as a police department. I guess just in general, what is that experience like, and how does it inform your decision-making process in these types of situations?
Sure. Active shooter training has evolved significantly since the time of Columbine. Columbine happened, and it was surround, wait for the SWAT team, go in, slowly make your way through the building, and that has evolved through many editions of the right tactic through today, which is now it's essentially a single patrol officer call, meaning while we send a lot of resources, when an officer gets on scene and there are indications of an active homicide happening, that the officer doesn't wait for anybody. They are, they make their way to wherever they believe the threat is in order to mitigate that threat. If several officers show up at the same time, then it becomes more of a team. And there are, waves. As waves of officers come, it becomes more coordinated. When supervisor arrives on scene, they'll set up a command post. They'll ensure things like perimeter. They'll ensure things like staging for rescues, things of that nature. But initially, it's all about the time. It's only a few seconds. Typically, in an active homicide or active shooter situation, only a few seconds goes by before there's another casualty, and so we're on the clock to get to that threat, and that's where we see active shooter training today. More recently, we have involved the fire department in doing what's known as rescue task force. So that we are not only actively going to the threat, but at the same time as these waves of resources show up, we are then actively rescuing those that may be bleeding and only have a short time and need that application of care.
And when you look at obviously the horrific situation in Uvalde, another thing that comes to mind with this type of stuff, and it's different. You mentioned a tight city, and we have a limited pool of police departments that would respond to something like this. It's not as if we have county or even school district police departments, but chain of command, things like this. Call comes in, it's Newport police that take the lead on any sort of response investigation, or is this something that state police or even frankly, Salve campus security or anybody who's in the area gets involved in? Who's in charge?
Sure, it would be the police department, the Newport Police Department. We're going to be in charge, and we are going to work very closely with our partners, both in public safety from surrounding agencies, and also the school department. The school department's a huge partner in this, and when we, as officers, show up, the training is pretty much the same across the country about how to respond to active shooter. So we are all essentially reading from the same book, from the same sheet of music. And so we have experience working with each other on other calls for service, and so it's a very easy transition for when officers arrive to assist with a critical situation such as an active shooter.
Chief Ryan Duffy, Police Department. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.